Welcome back, guys, to a bit of everything. On today's video we're going to be showing you an opening called Traxler's Defense. Traxler, this is played mainly on the black side, and the main line starts off with King's pawn e4, e5. We have knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight g5, bishop c5, and finally knight takes f7. This is the main line of Traxler. Before we go through some of the basic lines, this variation was invented by Karl Traxler, in which the opening ignores white's attack on f7, which leads to aggressive plays on the black side. Just having a look at black's position here, as you can see, when bishop takes knight takes f7 first, then bishop will reply by taking f2. As we can see, the king can move up here to e2, he can move to f1, or simply just by taking that f2 bishop. Alright, having a look here, the king will take that f2 bishop, to which the knight over here will take that e4 pawn. If we flip the board, as you can see, the king has been checked. The king doesn't want to move out because it does open a lot of threats with that pawn playing there, threatening maybe a play over here with the bishop, securing the king and queen. But essentially, white does not want his king to move away from the board. So he wants to stay closer to his other pieces. So a logical move would be the king to move back to e1. To which the queen will reply with h4. As we can see, if the king does tend to move here to that f1 square, the queen can checkmate that king over there with the help of the knight. Alright, let's flip that board around. So, as you can see, queen h4, the king moves to f1, the queen will checkmate over there. So, from this position on, instead of the king moving to f1, he will move down to e2. The queen will still check here, but instead of checkmating, the king has that open space over here on d3. By moving that king on d3, as you can see, for white, it's very weak. His king is out in the open, blocking these pawns, stopping his pieces from pretty much coming out into play. To which this knight over here will move to c5, checking the king, forcing the king only to move to this position here. Flip the board. That king can't move down here because it's being defended by that square, by the e-pawn. King can't move here. That knight over here is still defending that. And so his only move is to move to that square over here, which is that f3 square. Alright, so the queen finished the king off by moving to that d4 square, checkmating that king. The king can't move up here, defended by the knight, as well as down here, defended by that knight. And that king can't reply by taking the queen because it's defended both by the knight as well as that king pawn. Alright, from this position on. As you can see, it's blocking that pawn now, stopping that knight from coming out into play, which the queen will reply with that checkmate over there. Alright, so now for a new variation. So as you can see, that king has taken that f2 pawn, to which our knight replied with knight takes e4 check. Alright, if we flip it to white's position, the king in the previous variation had moved back to e1. So from here, this time the king will move down to f1. As you can see, the same rules apply to queen h4, moving your queen away from that attack from that f7 knight, threatening to checkmate over here on that f2 defended by the knight. Alright, the white will play queen e1, defending that queen, wanting to swap off the queen. there's another variation to which the queen can play here, queen e2 as well, but we'll have a look at that later on. And flipping it to black side, we can see it's very powerful with that queen and that knight attacking that f2 square. There's nothing defending that square. Alright, so after queen h4, queen will play e1, wanting to swap off the queens, but your knight will play g3 check. Alright, as you can see, by checking the king here, if the pawn was to take that, our queen would be able to take that rook pawn. If the queen takes that g3 pawn, g3 knight, sorry, the queen can reply by taking the bishop on c4, as well as checking the king. Alright, so just flipping it over on white's point of view, as you can see, that knight will check over here, forking both the king and the rook. So if the king was to move up here, we can take that knight, as well as checking the king and the queen. Alright, however, white isn't that dumb enough to play pawn takes g3, so the queen will reply by taking that g3 knight, to which the queen will take c4 check. Let's flip the board around. c4 check, king will move back to e1, queen e4 check over here. As you can see, it's directly attacking the king, as well as threatening to take that pawn over here. Alright, after queen e4 check, king will move to d1, and what we'll do is we will move to d6. Opening that d6 defends this pawn from any rook attack like that. So threatening to defend, playing defensive, as well as opening your bishop to threaten to check that king. Alright, just from this position we can see if that knight wants to take that rook, our bishop can come in here, pretty much sacrificing the queen, and black will be at an advantage. Alright, so after playing that d6 pawn, queen will move to e3, wanting to swap off the queens, and as well as blocking, if that bishop was to check, that king can move there because of that queen defending that square. Alright, flip it over to black's position, queen moves to e3, queen g4 still check, and queen will be forced to move down, and bishop takes advantage. Actually, sorry, no, queen will take checkmate. Alright, so as you can see, after the queen will move here, queen g4 check, queen will move e2, and knight d4. Alright, as we can see here, we are threatening to attack that e2 square. So if the queen was to reply by taking the queen, we have a positional advantage by the bishop coming out, checking that king. King will move to e1, and if from this point on we can take that pawn over here, both attacking the king and the rook, to which if the king moves down to here or up here, playing it safe, we can castle, attacking that knight, attacking that rook over there, which pretty much is a free rook, as well as this knight here. Can't do anything about it. Alright, another variation we talked about was after king takes f2, knight will play e4. So instead of the king moving back here to e1, what if the king played e2? Alright, so after king e2, the same move applies with moving your queen to h4, wanting to remove that threat from that knight. So after queen h4, queen will want to play e1. If we just flip the board to have a look on this side, as you can see, that queen wants to swap off that queen. knowing that it's a threat, as the knight and the queen together in the middle is very powerful. All right, so queen moves to e1, wanting to attack. Knight will play g3, defending that attack on the queen with the knight. And of course, if the pawn takes, threatening the queen to attack, as we can see, white has made himself a double pawn, to which queen can reply, taking that bishop check, as well as attacking that knight. So as we can see here, this is just flipped. After pawn takes g3, queen can take that c4 bishop, checking that king, as well as doubling, attacking that knight here as well. So if king moves to d1, queen can take that knight. All right, just flip the board back. Looking at it from white angle, knight takes g3, to which a better move would be queen takes g3, taking that knight, wanting to swap that queen, and not making that double pawns. However, queen will still reply with taking c4, king d1, and queen will take it anyways, take that knight. Let's look at it from black side. So here, after knight g3 check, king has other possibilities, such as over here, down to d3. However, he does put himself for checkmate over there. King can't move back up because it's defended by the knight. Can't move here because it's defended by queen. And he's pretty much blocked himself out. Alright. So the queen will take that g3. Queen will take c4 check. And the king doesn't want to get into any more trouble, because if he moves here to f2, queen will take that knight, checking that king up there as well, as you can see. So to remove all threats, after queen takes c4, king can hide in the corner, and queen will reply by taking that f7 knight. And as you can see here, we have one piece utilized, so that knight and the queen actually, so two pieces. And compared to white has still three pieces underneath, undeveloped, as well as that rook over there. So we have a new variation over here. After knight takes f7, bishops will take f2, king will reply with taking f2, and over here, knight will take e4 check. So instead of the king moving back to e1, this variation will move the king to f1. So white moves f1, queen still plays queen h4, queen e1 to defend, checkmate, knight g3 check, queen will reply with taking g3, and our queen will take the bishop on c4, checking the king. King will reply back with e1, queen e4 check, king will move to d1, hiding in the corner, and we will open up our pawn on d6, threatening to checkmate, or threatening to check the king with the bishop, and the queen will have to sacrifice itself in order to save it. So after d6, queen will move to e3, wanting to swap queens. Queen g4 check, queen will go down to e2, defend, and knight d4. As you can see here, if the white queen takes black queen, our bishop will reply with a counterattack, checking the king.